was the stern reply. So just for your information, we will record it and then make it available to anybody else that wants to see it.
But also, Guy, it gives Pete the opportunity now to tell that terrible joke about crocodiles and alligators. It's terrible.
Go ahead.
Anyway.
You've stolen my thunder. You should complete.
No. Please, no. Because no, it's on the delivery. It's quite snappy, though.
Drum roll for that one.
I'm going to mute.
I think you should get your coat, Kenny, quite honestly. Okay, welcome to everyone. Pete is going to talk this morning about alligating, and I'm here. If we've not met before, I'm Guy Collier. I'm the head of the Academy. Kenny's also here in support, who's one of our esteemed development officers, and Sam is lurking in the background, managing the IT and letting people in as and when they arrive. So without any further ado, Pete Connolly, over to you.
Thank you, Guy. Good morning, folks, and welcome. As you've just heard, my name is Pete Connolly. I'm a trainer and assessor with the Police Crime Prevention Academy. My background was in policing as a design and out crime officer for the Police Service of Northern Ireland. And the presentation that I'm going to make today, as you can see on screen, is the Police CPI Guide to Alligating. So this guide is one of a series that has been produced by Police Crime Prevention Initiatives, or Police CPI, at the request of the Home Office, and it is in support of the Safer Streets Fund. The Safer Streets Fund, as I'm sure you're all aware, enables police and crime commissioners to bid for investment in initiatives focused on reducing and preventing neighbourhood crime, be that antisocial behaviour, violence against women and girls in public places, burglary, whatever form of neighbourhood crime. This is always aimed then at increasing feelings of safety. So the guide aims to increase the awareness of many of the important aspects that should be considered before and during the delivery of crime prevention intervention, in this case alligating, to enhance access control within our built environments and local neighbourhoods. So the Safer Streets Fund, across its whole remit, is very much aimed at achieving sustainable reductions in crime prevention and to realise those in their fullest ability and capacity. So, alligating. So see here on screen, alligating is about fixing security gates to the entrances of alleyways that provide access to the side and the rear of residential and business premises. The gates will prevent access to any such space, and those in turn have the potential to reduce incidents, as I said already, robbery, burglary, criminal damage, graffiti, fly tipping, all forms of antisocial behaviour, all behaviours that are going to give rise to a fear of crime within our local neighbourhoods and communities. And albeit that the gates restrict access for criminals, people who we don't want in and around our residential or business premises, the passageways can still be used by the legitimate residents and occupants in those areas. There will be access for the fire and rescue service and other lawful users, and that will be managed through the controlled provision of keys or passcodes. And this form of access control often leads to the adoption of those particular private spaces, the alleyways, by those local communities, the occupants who live in immediate space around the sealed off or alligated walkways. And what we will see, and I'll show some evidence of that shortly, where people have claimed the ownership of those places after a good alligating scheme has been put in place. They have created additional recreational space for themselves, places where they can socialise with friends, neighbours, and all of that talks about better ownership, more active guardianship, safer guardianship within those places. And again, when the land is adopted in that way, it's cultivated in that manner, that creates a greater sense of safety within our built environments, within our neighbourhoods, whether it's for the residents to go and enjoy a cup of coffee, to provide a safe place for our children to play. And in some instances, we will hear of alley gating schemes being referred to as alley greening. And if I go to my next picture, this is a picture that I took at a site in Belfast. Kenny and I went to meet some built environment specialists and talked about a project that we're doing in Belfast called 9 Foot in Common. And here we see the gate which allows view into that alleyway. So there is good access control by that closed locked gate, but there is a view into that space, and we can see beyond the gate the effect that it's had on local people, where some people put pot plants out, some will put the kids' toys out, there's some decoration and bunting around the space. All of that talking about a very positive response from the people who live immediately adjacent to that particular site. Now, some of the description around alley gates, what we might encounter when we see that, well, gates, when we do it through a good scheme for alley gating, someone has just come on screen. Is my presentation still on the main screen? It is? Okay, no problem, thank you.
Yeah, it's all still good.
Good stuff. So the gates should be purpose-built, manufactured to a high-quality standard. So what we're looking for is generally gates that are going to be at least 2 meters in height, preferably made of a mild steel construction, powder-coated painting, and anti-climb design of some sort on the top. In this picture, we can see that it's, if you can see my cursor, it's a roller bar, a series of rollers on a bar to make it difficult for anyone to try to climb over there. In some instances, we will see that with maybe spikes, rotating vanes, that sort of thing. Other features of the gates, this one is an example. That gate is inward opening into the alleyway for the simple reason that it's not going to open out onto the public domain and potentially cause injury or damage to people or property who may be in the vicinity of the gate. If it were required to be a fire escape route and had to be outward opening, that gate would need to be set further back, recessed into the alleyway, so that when it opens, again, it wouldn't open out onto the public pathway beyond. Features of these gates that we often will see is that they are self-locking. So basically, snap lock. When it closes, the lock engages by itself. It will deadlock to be key operated on both sides. And as I've already said, this particular presentation of the gate allows view into the alley and view out of the alleyway. So no hiding places, no fear of crime, because we can see that danger is present or absent and make our informed decisions as we go to move through the gated alleyway. Again, as shown in this particular image, the gates should be self-supporting so that the posts are capable of holding the gate up without the post being fixed to the walls beside them. That way we can be certain that the gates aren't going to cause, because of load bearing, not going to cause any damage to the structure of the buildings immediately around them. And in this particular instance, that gate is one that includes noise dampening fittings. So basically, when it closes over, we don't get a horrendous metal on metal clang, but we get just a nice, firm, snibbing, snap sound as the gate engages without causing a noise nuisance that might be problematic for others living close by. Leads us on to why alley gate, and I suppose most of us can think of this fairly much within our own minds. Why would we want to alley gate? Well, as we see on screen here, the commensurate design features and security products such as alley gates can provide a level of physical security that will defeat the abilities of the average criminal by deterring, delaying and detecting them. When we talk about the deter, alley gates can help to discourage criminals by removing their ability to gain easy, unobserved access to the side or rear of residential and commercial properties. So that's a good starting point. The delay, well, alley gates make it more difficult for a criminally minded person to commit burglary or to steal property because it increases the likelihood of them being caught. And part of the reason it increases the likelihood of them being caught, well, they're acting in a way that is more suspicious. It's going to draw attention to them. To defeat a good physical security barrier, they may need to carry tools with them. So they're increasing the opportunity for stop searches to identify them as committing crimes of going equipped. And then if they actually go ahead and use those tools, by making more noise, they're creating more likelihood of themselves being caught also. So we have deterrence, we have delay, and all of that leading into detection. So where the alley gates are installed, the criminals going equipped are more likely to be detected. Their creation of noise and the length of time that it's taking them is a increase in the likelihood of them being seen, recognized, reported, and detected and detained. So all of those things working together, and where they may have committed a crime and got away, well, there's more potential that they're going to leave forensic evidence behind where they've had to use force at the scene to create the offence. Now, all of this building into or linking into routine activity theory. And routine activity theory in its most simple form would tell us that for a crime to occur, a motivated offender has to find a suitable target in the absence of a capable guardian. So the idea then around all of that, the motivated offender, the person who wants to commit crime, who wants to realize cash for goods that they may steal, they find a suitable target. Well, actually, the alley gates might reduce the likelihood that a particular neighborhood is a suitable target anymore. The capable guardian, no alley gates, less deterrent, but the inclusion then of the alley gates, that is creating a layer of physical security which acts potentially as a capable guardian. So many aspects of our simple crime prevention and crime prevention theory then working together here to tell us that there is a real strength to a well considered intervention against a burglary or acquisitive crime risk where alley gating has been used. And we're going to talk a little more about our problem solving and the application of SAR in respect of that. So why alley gate? Again, here we have on screen a quote. I'll come back to that in a moment. The most important reason why alley gating works is that it restricts access to criminals and thereby prevents crime. It serves to reduce the fear of crime whilst promoting community cohesion for the people who live in the immediate environs of a good alley gating scheme. And that promotes ownership and responsibility for that space by those people where access has been restricted, where arguably the space has been privatized for the use, particularly of the occupants who are in that immediate vicinity. And by reducing access to only key holders, those occupants, it can serve to identify the persistent offenders who live locally or may even have access to the alleyway, because if they're going to commit crime within the area that they have access, we're kind of bringing more focus to them as the potential suspect. The British Crime Survey in the past has shown that 55% of burglaries in terrace and semi-detached houses, even detached houses, are affected through the rear. So alley gating, that where we see it used, is invariably about providing safety and security, access control over movement spaces to the sides and rear of buildings. And this brings us to the quote that's on screen, which you can see very clearly, a piece of research that was done back in 2003. And the direct quote from it: "There is strong evidence that alley gating reduces burglary and disorder and increases the perception of safety and the satisfaction within area of residence. In terms of crime reduction, it is among the most effective crime prevention techniques that has been rigorously evaluated to date." Now, people, when they talk about alley gating, will very often point to that research from Liverpool. There are many, many other schemes. I talk of research from London, from Belfast, so many places all around the United Kingdom where an alley gating scheme, well considered and well implemented, has had a really significant impact on crime in local neighbourhoods. This leads us on then to the where to employ alley gating. As we can see, it's a form of a crime prevention tactic that is best employed where there is a good crime pattern analysis that indicates that the ease of access to an alleyway or series of alleyways at the side and rear of properties is a significant contributory factor to the number of offences being committed in the area, such as robbery, burglary, criminal damage, graffiti, fly tipping, or any other form of antisocial behaviour. So again, I come back to this concept, and we could talk about it on the next slide. We'll talk about SARA. I can give an example of many years ago when I was still serving with Police Service of Northern Ireland, and a contact from Belfast City Council, who was in charge of their alley gating scheme, got in touch and said, we are doing a rollout for alley gating. And the way they did it at that time, they themed it not to general crime, but particular forms of crime. And the first year that I got this call, the chap was saying, we are looking at burglary. And I had a particular set of streets in mind, which were a row of houses fronting onto a main arterial route, and then a series of 5 streets sat at 90 degrees off that main route. And there was a rear alley behind the shops to the front, but then there was an alley between the backs of the houses on each of the abutting streets. So to close that off, we really needed to create a T at the back of the row of shops onto the front. So 2 gates to the bottom end of the street and 1 gate at the top to close them off. Now, because Gavin said we are specifically looking for somewhere with a burglary problem, my local knowledge told me that there was burglary happening in that immediate neighbourhood. But the burglaries at that time were happening. People were walking along the street of terraced houses at night, and they were trying door handles. And if they found an unlocked front door, they stepped in and stole what was immediately available to them. An alley gating scheme would not have worked to reduce burglary there because so few of the burglaries were being committed from the alley. And this is where us using a tactic where we use really good problem solving and we use good evidence to identify the real nature of the problem. Now, at that time, I told Gavin that that's where I had in mind, but I don't think it's appropriate this time. He got in touch with me the following year to say, different raft of money. We are now focusing on antisocial behaviour and drug use. And I said to him, okay, the streets, I said no last year, if that's what your metric is going to be for success, you will have an impact on those problems by introducing the alley gates now. And it's the interesting thing of, I have spoken here this morning about lots of antisocial behaviour problems. If your metrics for success around the scheme are going to be very limited to particular problems, then you need to be certain that your response is going to deal with those particular problems, unless you're going to be allowed to include a great diffusion of benefits by tackling so many other things that you can divert the fact of, well, the first time around, I wouldn't have impacted on burglary, but I would have impacted on drugs and antisocial behaviour. But that wasn't what the project was going to be judged on the first time around. And again, this leads me on then to when it is appropriate to use alley gating, and this our application of the SARA problem solving model, scanning for information, finding out as much information we can about our local problem, our analysis using the problem analysis triangle, what are the features of the location, what are the features of the offenders, what are the features of the victim, taking all of our scanned information, bringing it together through that analysis process to identify the real problems, to allow us to come up with the proper response to the actual problems that exist in our particular case study, and then moving on to the assessment. What were the SMART objectives for our project? What were the metrics that we had said in advance were going to be used to measure our project? And then at that assessment stage, bringing those SMART objectives back and saying, have we met those targets? Have we exceeded them? What worked? What didn't work? So really, really important that when we think about problem solving in respect of alley gating, we start to think and say scanning, identifying, prioritizing the potential crime and disorder problems that we have there. That analysis of the problem from the information, the intelligence, the community information, that we are using that to identify the real problem and its underlying causes. And as I've said, the response is then about the development and implementation of tailored activities. Who is going to be responsible? Who is going to be involved? Who is going to take lead? and that becomes really, really important. And the assessment then back to, as I've said already, the measurement of the impact of the response. Has it had the desired effect? And if, as our ongoing analysis during a project, if it's not having the success we wish, at what stage do we start to make changes to the response to achieve the required results from it? All of this ties in to be very important about how to alligate. As you can see here, a series of bullet points on screen. There are many guides from various councils around the UK where there have been a range of great experiences of people introducing their experience and their learning from alligating schemes. And that's so important for all of us then as problem solvers to have an understanding what has worked in the past, what hasn't worked in the past. Are my circumstances different? Can I take someone else's model and implement it directly, or do I need to make amendments to it? And it is so important that we are conscious of all of the various guides that we need to be familiar with in our local areas when we're working with partners. And here, the first, confirm with the local authority if alleys are private property or public right of way. I cannot just decide that I'm going to alligate an open alleyway and close it down unless I have done all of my homework and unless I have spoken with all of the occupants whose properties have bought it, without checking with the local authority and the planning office to see what permissions I require to do what I seek to do. And also then to think of other interested bodies, the Ramblers Association. We could go through a process to close off alleys, to have access control on them with an alley-gate scheme, and find ourselves being challenged by the Ramblers Association because we haven't given full consideration to the potential of the public right of way there. So again, part of our scanning for any of these projects is finding out all of that relevant information. Who are the other stakeholders? Who are the interested parties? Who are the people who we need to have on board? Who are the other people who may have funding or other resources that we need to be able to get access to? Point two, land registry checks to enable consultation prior to the alligating. Again, who owns the properties along the alley that we are going for? It could be the case that there are a row of houses where the tenants are all quite happy to have alligating implemented, but actually they're not necessarily the owners of the site. So there might be other people who we need to talk to as well. And land registry through partnership can help us find out some of that additional information. Local police intelligence to inform the best placement. Now, this is about where we actually put the alligates. You know, talking to our local PCSO, the beat constable, the beat sergeant or manager, talking to the analysts for the better levels of information. What crime's happening, where are the natural choke points, where can we best bring control into an area, as opposed to why alligate a whole estate if there are very specific areas within it that are problematic. So again, getting all of that right information. And at point four, I already alluded to it, the local planning and highways authority should be consulted at all stages. And again, the objective is to ensure that if installed, the gating is lawful. From time to time, we will read information from planning services around the country where a project of some nature, be it a new building, office block, apartments, whatever, or potentially an alligating scheme, where something has gone ahead without the correct permissions and planning service have required that it be dismantled and removed. So things for us to think about and to consider. Within the guide, it signposts us to some of this relevant legislation to consider in respect of alligating. And without going into the fine detail of all of these statutes in front of us, just to comment that all installations must need the access needs of residents and visitors who have difficulties, disabilities, or mobility difficulties. So we have to give consideration to things simple as the height at which locks are set within any set of gates. And that's really important for people who are using mobility scooters, who have wheelchairs or using walking frames. These facilities, when put into the public realm, have to be capable of being used by everyone, and we shouldn't be excluding people who have any level of disability, because we leave ourselves at risk at foot of the Equality Act. Other things then, looking at the statutes that we have on board then, is thinking about who are the other statutory agencies, the emergency services, utility companies, who else needs to have access into those spaces for whatever reason. When we look at the section 59 of the Public Spaces Protection Order provision, when you look into the better detail within the guide, it starts to point us towards the fact that, well, a local authority can make public space protection orders. There are a number of provisions that it references to. It talks to the fact of activities being carried out in the public space within that authority's area, which might have a detrimental effect on the quality of life of people living in the area or the locality, and or if there is a likelihood that the activities that will be carried on in a public place in such a way that they will have that detrimental effect. There's another condition, and that talks then about the persistent nature or continuing nature of the problems, and it requires justification of the restrictions imposed by notices. Now, we have under section 71 of the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act a further regulation, and it talks about bodies other than statutory or local authorities other than the statutory functions that are going on there. So the Secretary of State can designate a person or a body that has power to make bylaws in relation to particular land, to specify land in England to which the powers relate. And then it starts to talk about a person or a body. So when we're talking then about public spaces protection orders, they can be issued on occasions by the local authority. They can be issued in some circumstances by a other person or a different authority. The important thing is to understand that where PSPO exists, there cannot be a second PSPO from that same authority or any other allowed authority to exist for that same place at the same time. So again, it starts to get a little technical, and I would advise all of you, take some time to read through that section, particularly if you're thinking about being engaged in an alligating scheme. Give yourself opportunity to have an understanding of some of the restrictions that are there, and to afford yourself best opportunity to ensure that you don't do something which may be contrary to law and create the need for your alligating scheme to be undone. So just some of the provisions that are included there. When we are engaged in an alligating scheme, it's really important that it's done through a partnership approach, rather than one person, one agency taking on to do it all by themselves, having the partnership. So the sit down, the meeting, the agreement, who all is partner to it, who all has a responsibility, what their various actions are, and then starting to look at an action plan. And it's really important that within that conversation and for an action plan, there are agreed timelines, there are agreed actions by various people, that there's a clear understanding that everyone has their particular roles to play and that they will achieve them by the set milestones and report back to regular meetings. Now, the example that's given within the guide itself is taken from a list created in Staffordshire. And the research and the crime pattern analysis shows a direct link between access opportunities and crime. This is where this all goes to. It talks within the guide about the use where it is possible to predict which properties in any given layout are most likely to be the target for crime. And if you think that the criminal wants to commit crime and get away scot-free, so invariably they want places where they can access quickly and have easy, better still, multiple escape routes, so that they can get away without being seen or recognized. So that doesn't come then as a big surprise to any of us. So the way and extent to which people can move around an area has a significant influence on the likely level of crime there and the rational choices that the opportunist criminal is going to make. The research that underpins this thinking is widespread, it's persistent. It says within the guide that it extends back over 2 decades. And I would go so far as to say, when we start to think of Oscar Newman's Defensible Space from 1972, well, actually, we're looking at this stuff going back 50 and more years. So there is a huge amount of evidence that points out to the fact that excessive access and permeability in any built environment is directly linked with higher levels of crime opportunity and actual crime happening. So for us as crime prevention professionals, then understanding that permeability is a necessity for every environment. A neighbourhood needs permeability. People need to be able to move in and through a neighbourhood for it to be successful. But it does start to query then, do we need excessive permeability? Does everyone need to be able to get everywhere all the time? And arguably, no, they don't. And we don't want to offer that level of permeability because it affords people anonymity. Because you challenge someone who's on an alleyway while they're there and say, because I'm going up through the alleyway, I'm going wherever I'm going. Whereas if they are in a more controlled space, they have to have a better reason for being there. So using allocating schemes to bolster the defensible space within a community rather than leaving all of that space open at all times. And again, I come back to this idea that we want positive permeability rather than excessive permeability. So continuing on this theme then about partnerships and milestones, how do we develop these partnerships? How do we set the milestones? And what it really comes down to is from the outset, us collecting and collating the crime statistics so we can identify specific alleyways within which alligating may be appropriate as a crime prevention tactic, to employ it to deal with the burglary, the fly tipping, the drug dealing, the antisocial behaviour, whatever is the problem in that particular place. Looking then to develop strong professional partnerships between local authorities, the local policing teams, the elected representatives, the residents associations, neighbourhood watch groups, an approved gate installer, whoever, and that's by no means the definitive list. It's very much a case of who are the interested stakeholders in that particular place and ensuring that they are all consulted with and where possible brought to the meeting. At a meeting of those partners, agreeing timetables, looking at the individual roles and responsibilities of all of the people who are there, thinking what are going to be the key stage indicators between those professional partnerships, and how we bring those along. Again, things to think of, timetables. Is there any point in me going out and getting an engineer to come and measure an alleyway up for a set of gates, and then getting into a purchase, a situation where we pay for the gates when we don't actually know that we have planning permission yet to be able to put the gates in place? So it's about aligning all of our requirements, as we're ducks in a line. What do we need to do at what stage to have things ready to go, but not get ahead of ourselves in particular ways, using our resources to the best possible availability. At the appropriate stage, conducting detailed site surveys and feasibility studies so that we can decide on the priorities regarding our budget allocation, and to ensure that alternative public access routes are available following the installation of an alligating scheme. It is not appropriate to say, you know what, I really don't like that alleyway and we're going to close it off. And you find that, well, actually, we're going to close an alleyway. It's 80 meters long, but the only other way for someone to walk around is actually to walk down and out of an estate and up a main road and into the next estate to get to the shops that they would have been able to get to in short access using the alley. So it's again this idea that our work has to be appropriate, it has to be realistic, it has to be cost effective, it has to take into consideration pattern of life around the neighbourhood. We want to improve standards for everyone, but we don't want to make life unnecessarily difficult for the vast majority of people. And deciding on the design of the gates and any attendant railings, the allocations of keys or fobs, whatever our management of access control is going to be. And again, if you're thinking of using fobs, well, then we need to have gates that have some form of power to them, most likely. So how are we going to manage all of that? Who's going to take responsibility for the management of keys? Who's going to collect keys back in? How can we restrict the keys that are being given out? And we certainly want to have suited keys from a security set that can't be copied and cut by anyone. So we have better control over them in that way as well. And again, all of this looking at things that are likely to be the subject of some form of contractual agreement between the PCC's office, the local authority, or a residents association. So thinking carefully about a range of different things that for the partnership to have agreement on, and milestones as to how we're going to measure our success around those things. Continuing on the same theme then, consulting local residents over the appropriate time frame and analyse their responses to prepare a consultation outcome report. The consultation outcome report should then be provided to any person, a regulatory committee that has oversight in respect of what we're doing, and that would include the councils or the local authorities leads for their finance and legal departments. The consultation with local residents is such an important thing because purely and simply, if I were someone who live on a street that's going to be impacted by an alligating scheme and I don't support the alligating, you're going to deliver your scheme, you're going to potentially give me a key, and I just out of malevolence might go down every night and open the gate and chalk it back, leave it lying open. You're going to spend a lot of money, and it doesn't take too many people who should be partners or stakeholders in the scheme to actively work against it, to negate all of the great benefit that you were seeking to achieve. So consultation with residents and having them on board is very, very important. Important also to invite contractors to tender for the work. Procurement schemes, depending on which of our partners is going to take the lead there, most often we will want at least 3 quotes from different contractors to give us the sense that there's value for money being achieved. We need to agree the cost, the timescales, and any other terms or conditions with the chosen contractors, and then produce a rollout plan for them. So again, part of our overall master plan is what's the rollout for the surveying for the gates, the measuring up for them, the getting them ordered, getting them delivered, getting them fitted as per the manufacturer's recommendations, and checking and testing that they are going to work in the way that we need. And that leads us on then to the next point, I've alluded to this in the previous slide, our key distribution. How are we going to manage that scheme? Who is going to be responsible for developing that, for ensuring that security is maintained, for ensuring that only the correct people are allocated with keys? And that includes those being made available to the emergency services and for anyone who has essential maintenance to do in the area, which is now going to be controlled. So we have to have a good sense about that security for the keys and how they will be managed. So we don't have them falling into the hands of anyone who can then use and abuse the space as they choose. And then the last point on screen, the regular reviews that should be regularly conducted to ensure that the alligating scheme is being appropriately used, that is being maintained and performing in accordance with the scheme's initial objectives. And that idea of maintenance is so important, because if you're familiar with the 7 attributes of safer places, the last on the list is always maintenance. An area that has regular maintenance, that has been part of the design of our built environment intervention, it makes such a difference. An alley gate scheme where someone comes around and makes sure that the gates function properly, that the locks open and close, that the gates work on their hinges the way that they're supposed to do, that there is cleansing going on inside the alleyway to ensure that people don't decide to start, we'll just start dumping stuff out there. We'll have a rat and insect infestation soon. There's so many aspects about how an alligating scheme needs that constant care, management, maintenance to ensure that it delivers the success that we want in the long term. And who should be involved? again, have alluded to this already. So the forming a partnership approach between residents, the community, the police, the local council or authority, education authority, if they are interested in it, all of the potential interested stakeholders, everyone who can contribute to delivering a crime prevention campaign that is going to be successful. And it is particularly important that the public support for a scheme is garnered and is managed and maintained, because it is critical to the success. I often say to people about my concept around community policing. Community policing is about doing policing with the community, for the community, because if in policing we do policing to the community, the community don't like that. And it is the same with an intervention like alligating. It has to be done in partnership with the community, for the community, so that they're on board with it, will support it, and will help to manage it in the long term to create the best successes that we can get from it. The consultation process should include, among others, whoever is the chief police officer for the area, sergeant, the inspector, the superintendent, the chief constable, so long as some key person is engaged and is working and showing the support for the project of work. The community representatives, the elected councillors, the council officers, the people working within the local authority, making sure that we don't just engage with the council, but we engage with all of the appropriate departments within the council. It's always dangerous to assume that I've spoken to one person, therefore everyone knows. So it's again a case of part of our SARA scanning. Who all do we need to be at the table? Well, find out what that information is, find out who those people are, and make sure those people are invited to take part in the process that we're going through. The owners, the occupants of any of the premises that are going to butt onto the area where we're considering implementing alligating. As I said already, we can't expect success if we don't have the engagement with those people. We need to ensure that the emergency services have access. So how will that be managed? Will local police have a key? Will fire service have a key? Will the ambulance service have a key? Other people think of then residents associations, local authorities, parish council, local council, county council. Who are all of the people that we want to be involved? We talked about local businesses, the gate suppliers already, land registry. There is a guide, or within the guide, an explanation of the strategy of alligating to prevent crime. And as I've said already, there are many different alligating guides around from different authorities and areas all over the UK. It's important that we give consideration to the difference in places. Many built environments, neighbourhoods where we have terraced houses with rear alleyways, call them wilks, gunnels, ginnels, 10 foots, 9 foots, whatever they're called locally. We should always give consideration to the fact that for all that they have in common, many of them have significant local differences. And if we're going to do an alligating scheme, we have to give consideration to the physical environment that we're going to put it in. I talked about gates and showed an image of a gate at 2 meters or slightly taller. There is no point in putting a 2-meter gate on an alleyway where the wall on either side of the gate is 5 feet tall, because it's easy to climb onto the wall and step around the gate. So we have to give consideration to exactly where we're going to place gates so that they have the potential to work in the way that we want and expect them to work. And as I said again, the consultation, making sure that we have all of our authority partners on board, so we have all of the correct permissions and giving consideration to all of the legal requirements that are going to be involved in a project. Folks, that is a whistle stop through the alligating guide. I hope it has been of some use to you. I am open to questions.
That's brilliant, Pete. I think the three main takeaways I've taken from that is, pardon me, to do your research if somebody's proposing alligating, or blocking off anything at all, really. Do your research first, make sure you consult with residents, and make sure you fit the right kit, which is all spells out, I think, within the guide and certainly on the Secured by Design website. Mr. Smith, I see you've got your hand up.
Yep, thanks for that, Pete. It was really good. For somebody who's inherited 3 historic Allygate schemes, I have quite a love-hate relationship with them for lots of reasons. But my question is a bit of a technical one. It might be how I heard it around the PSPOs. You were saying you can't have more than one in one area. Is that just to do with Allygates? Or...
My understanding of that, as I read this, is you cannot have 2 PSPOs on the same geographical piece of ground. Now, that was my reading of the guide. And because I am Northern Ireland based and I never actually have used the PSPOs in my policing experience here in Northern Ireland, I am not a great authority on them. I'm not trying to sweep it away, but my understanding is that they say because the local authority can create PSPOs, but other people have the potential to do it as well. And my understanding is you can't have 2 PSPOs on the same area with the same conditions, because you're into a duplication.
Excellent. Because I just think, because we have one for like drinking, our whole borough has a drinking PSPO.
Yes.
And I was just trying to work out if that would then limit us to having a gating PSPO.
Oh, no. The drinking one, the conditions about is about no drinking alcohol.
Yep.
So the other one, so sorry, I obviously didn't make that clear. You can't have 2 PSPOs in the same place that have the same conditions, but you can have a range of different PSPOs so long as they don't duplicate each other.
Perfect. That makes perfect sense. No, thank you for clarifying that.
Any other questions at all? Just checking the chat box. There's nothing in there, Pete. I mean, obviously, we're specialising today in alligating, but if you've got questions regarding any other parts of your Safer Streets projects, while we're here, we're more than happy to assist and advise. If there's nothing at all.
Tumbleweeds.
I think it was tumbleweed and a lone bell ringing in the distance. Thank you all very much for your time this morning. I'm not going to stretch this out painfully, so it's very good of you to spare the time. Thanks very much to Pete for a very informative talk. And I think I'm just going to check the next one will be later this month, I believe. 30th of January, and that will be on access control. And again, at the end of that, we will be taking up any other questions as well regarding your projects and offering any support we can. We've also got the normal Safer Streets drop-in. The next one will be on Friday the 26th of January, and I think it's all done off the same link as well. So please have 9 minutes of your day back. Thank you very much and have a good rest of the day.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.